Good morning YouTube, what's happening, what's going on? Today I'm going to be showing you how to replace the front air strut and air suspension in your E53 X5. We'll be replacing this air strut today with a remanufactured unit from a company called Arnott. Okay, so here is our new strut. As always, I will link this up in the description below. And this is a really great company. They make some solid products for the money, and highly recommend going with this company. Now, the first thing that you want to do is remove some of the stuff in the trunk, and we're going to disconnect the battery since we're going to be working on the air suspension. Now you're going to remove the spare wheel or the donut, whatever you have, under your storage compartment, and we're going to just disconnect the negative terminal from the battery. We're going to be jacking up the car from the jack point on the driver's side of the car. And super important, always use jack stands and take safety precautions when you're going to be working underneath the car. Never allow the jack to support the weight of the car alone. So we're going to remove the front wheel. We'll roll that out of the way, and now we can begin work. First, we're going to release the clip that secures the brake line to the strut. We'll slide our ABS sensor and our brake lining wear sensor, which connects to the brake pads. Just pop those rubber lines off of the strut. Next, we're going to use our impact gun and a box end wrench. They are both 22mm to remove the nut and bolt that secure the strut to the spindle. Now, if you don't have an air tool like an impact gun, it's going to take a little bit more effort when you're using like a 3/8 drive or a 1/2-inch drive ratchet, but I would definitely recommend air tools for this job. It makes it super quick. Now, I also picked up a special bike tool wrench. This is a 17 and 18mm open-ended wrench, and it's very slim. It's only a few millimeters wide. And that's the special tool we're going to need to hold the back of the sway bar link while we remove the nut. You can pick up one of these from Amazon, and I have a link to that wrench. It's only a few dollars. It's in the description below. So sometimes in order to get the sway bar link off, you're going to need to jack up underneath the spindle slightly, just so the link, the pressure is removed from the link, and then you can pull it off of the strut. And I'll just put the nut back on here to keep it in a safe place. Now we can remove the nuts and the bolts that secure the strut to the spindle, and there's also a small bracket here which we'll just slide off. Now we can remove the nuts that secure the strut to the top of the strut tower. That is a 13mm socket, and I would recommend using a deep socket for the front two, and also a universal joint on a shorter socket for the one in the back. Alternatively, you can remove some of the plastic trim that surrounds that nut in the back to make it easier to access the nut. Our next step, we can lower down the strut assembly down from the strut housing. We're not going to remove it all the way from the car yet because we still have the airline to disconnect. Now, just a caveat about this part. This car has some blown air struts. The airbags no longer held air due to a leak, so removing the line from the strut was super easy. Now, Arnott gave me directions on how to remove it if the the airbag is still inflated with air. First, you're going to crack open the fitting on the top of the where the line inserts into the strut, and allow the air to bleed down slowly. So you're going to just do all these steps here, crack open the fitting, and it will just hiss away for several minutes until all of the air is relieved from the system. Now, of course, you probably want to wear ear protection, eye protection, all of the protection. I have not replaced a strut that was still inflated with air, so proceed with caution. Now, to remove this fitting, it requires a 12mm wrench, and instead of using just a open-ended wrench, I would recommend using a brake line wrench, which is what I used here, and I'll link that up in the description below. Now, you have to be quite careful at this point to make sure that you're not pulling down too hard on the strut. You want to have it supported a little bit so that you don't break or crack or cause any damage to the airline that's going into the strut. Now that the fitting is removed, we can take the entire strut assembly down and out of the car. Here's a quick look at the new strut next to the old one. And as you can see here, the original strut has 125,000 miles. The rubber is stretched out and sort of ballooned out, where the new one on the left is pretty slim. And that's just due to age. The rubber gets swollen and no longer really becomes that effective or that safe. So before we can install the new strut, there is a white plastic fitting in the top of the strut mount. Just wiggle that back and forth and pull it out. Okay, so here is the original airline, the original fitting, and we're going to need to remove the fitting from the line before we can slide the airline into the new fitting that comes with your remanufactured or new strut. So first we're going to slide that fitting back as far as it can go up against the molded plastic there. We're going to take a small flathead, sort of a needle nose flat pliers, and just manipulate the collar that is on the end of the airline. We're going to try to break that off without doing any damage to the airline. Now, if this is the first time that you're seeing this, it probably looks difficult, but to be honest, the collar is pretty soft and it will come off much easier than you think. Once that collar is removed, we can slide the brass fitting off of the airline entirely. With that step complete, we can slide our new strut up and into the car, and then we're going to slide the airline into the brass fitting on the new strut. So we're just going to push that line all the way in until it's seated. There's like a round donut sort of molded into that line, and it's just going to push in all the way up until the point where it stops. Then you can pull back on it a little bit to lock it into place. Now you have to be very careful at this point not to let go of the strut or let it fall, in between the suspension, because you don't want to put any additional stress onto that plastic airline. So it definitely helps at this point to have someone help you so that you can align the studs of the strut mount up into the strut housing of the car and replace the nuts that hold it into place. Now you can do it on your own, and I did it on my own here. It's just going to take a few more minutes of cursing and struggling. Once we have everything aligned, we can loosely screw on the nuts. We'll hold the strut into place. We're not going to tighten those down yet until we lower the car down with the wheel, on the ground, and the weight of the car is pretty much on the strut. And we'll just pop the dust cap into place. With that step taken care of, we're going to manipulate the front spindle so that the strut goes back into alignment so we can put the two bolts back into place. Also, I just want to note that while I had this apart, the drive axle, the joint sort of popped out of place, and you might want to, take a closer look at that when you go to reassemble. We'll slide our brake line back into the bracket on the strut. We'll tighten our 22mm nut and bolt. Here's a look at that from another angle. We'll pop our brake wear sensor and our ABS sensor back into the bracket that come off of the strut. Now to reattach our sway bar link, we might want to jack up on that lower control arm a little bit, just so that we can slide the threads of the sway bar link into the mounting point on the strut. And again, we will thread on the nut onto that sway bar link and use our special tool to hold the stud while we tighten it up. And don't forget to clip the securing clip back to the brake line on the strut. With that complete, we can lower our jack down and replace the wheel back onto the car. Now that the weight of the car is on the ground, we can go back up top and torque down our 13mm nuts at the top of the strut housing. And then we'll reconnect the battery. Don't forget to connect that negative terminal, put your spare wheel back in the trunk, and you're good to go. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope this has helped you out and given you some confidence to complete this job yourself. If you're looking to purchase new air suspension parts and you need some of the tools, please consider using some of the links in the description below. Any purchases that you make after clicking on those links just goes to help supporting this channel. If this video helped you out, please smash that like button and subscribe.